I want to turn this meeting over now to Léonie Rosenstiel, who's going to give us some insights into how AI is affecting the literary world. Léonie?
Okay. We've been hearing a lot about AI, and in fact, we're using it whether we know we are or not. And so I'm going to start by asking you a little quiz, because one of the tests of a level of AI having been reached is whether you can tell whether something is written by a human, written by AI, is it fictional, or is it fact? And this is the first one. Actually, that's the second one. Here's one. Here we go. It was supposed to start at the beginning. That's my big test. It was at number 1 and then it went back. Why is it doing that? All right, let's start at the beginning. I can't start at the beginning again because it's giving you, it's at number 17 and it needs to be at number 1. Okay. I'm going back to this way. It's going to work. Okay. First question. Is this written by AI? Is it something that AI came up with? Did a human write it? Is it true? Is it even true? Sounds like a teenager got bored and went off on his own, right? So I'm going to ask you, just make a little note of what you think it is, and I'll tell you when we get finished with all of them. There are only a few. Next one. This is a little bit more negative. Next one. Next one. Very logical outgrowth of the last one, except this one came out before that one. And here's the last one. That one makes it sound like it's Halloween and they're coming for you. So, if you have everything that you think what it is and you've written it down, now I'll tell you. I need to go back first to the original, what are normally called the prime directives or the laws that govern robotics, and this is a robot function AI. The first one is robots and AI in general is not allowed to injure humans or allow humans to be harmed. So just think about that in relation to what you've just read. The second law, they must obey human orders except when it would violate rule number 1. Third rule, the robot must protect itself, except when doing that violates either rule number 1 or rule number 2. And those laws were created by Isaac Asimov, who was both a scientist and a science fiction writer. And I was a huge sci-fi fan as a kid. And it kind of bleeds into what I do and how I think. Don't confuse these rules with the Star Trek Prime Directive not to get involved in the society in a way that will prevent its development. They're not the same things. But this came out in 1947 and it's still around. So the first one that you saw was from an AI named, about an AI named Claude, and it is a regular article by a human writer that appeared in a magazine called Futurism, which is a very, very nice news source for what's going on in the AI world. If you're interested in that, it's involved in all kinds of futuristic questions and philosophies and problems, so that it's a nice place where everything all gets pulled together. The second one is also from futurism, and it is also true. And unfortunately, that 14-year-old did commit suicide, and there's a lawsuit in progress as a result of it. The third one and the fourth one are both also from futurism, and they are true. And it looks from the headlines as if they should be in the opposite order, because it says there are problems with AI. They're creating AI assistants, and then it says AI assistants are causing problems. And I'll explain why that would be more true with computer code than with some other things later on. The last one is also true, and it was on CBS News on the date that I listed. So it's very, very recent. So looking at these headlines and listening to the prime directives for computers, you already know there's a problem and there are things that are contradictory and that probably should not be happening, but they are. Computers should not be telling humans to die, but they are. So this is something that we need to deal with, because there are already some flaws in the programming, and it's because the programming is created by humans. And when you set up a very logical progression of conditions and you tell someone without a conscience or something without a conscience, this is what happens and this is the sequence that it happens in, they are not going to have moral scruples, and they are going to give information that potentially can be harmful, even though they're not supposed to harm you. So you need to be careful. So I'm going to tell you a little bit now about everything that's going into this. I did already start with a few of the concepts, but I need to go back and give you a little bit of the history of AI, what its roles are in writing. And then what I did was, I was an experimenter. I had 4 dialogues with 4 of the major AI systems, platforms, they call them. ChatGPT, which everybody knows about, Claude, which belongs to Amazon and Google, Llama or Llama, however you wish to pronounce it, which is from Meta, and Perplexity, which is a private company. And there were some very, very different results for very specific reasons. And I'll explain to you why they happened the way they did. Then I'll go into some of the potential problems with AI and practical uses. So let's get started on that. Now we're going into the ancient world first, because there were concepts of AI that go all the way back to Homer and Apollonius and the ancient Greek gods, because Hephaestus was said to have created handmaidens to perform services for him, and they had knowledge of the gods inside of them, and they were being asked to do various tasks, which is very much like our robotic concept today. The origin of the Terminator comes from ancient Crete, a creation called Talos that was supposed to protect Crete, and he did that by throwing big rocks at invading ships and protected the island. 1001 Nights have stories that are really like our science fiction and talk about robotic things happening, except that their robots and our robots look different. So we go into the 19th century, and then we find E.T.A. Hoffman, who was a very popular writer at the time, talking about an AI that a man falls in love with, and when he discovers she's not human, he commits suicide. It's another one. And of course, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein came out in 1818, which is 2 years right after E.T. Hoffmann. Go into the 20th century, and you have Carol Chapek, who wrote R.U.R., which was a play that was very famous and very popular at the time in 1920 about robots. And he's the one who invented the word robot. So when we get to World War II, it's no surprise really that the computers in England that were cracking codes and protecting the British Isles were called Colossus, which was the name of the Colossus of Rhodes, who was protecting the island against invasion. So we're back there again. So we're kind of getting the message that the people who were cracking the codes in World War II, a lot of them were scholars and authors and writers of fiction who were very conversant with the classics. So now the first test that you just had, which was going over all of those headlines and trying to determine whether in fact they were written by AI or by a human, or whether they were just created out of whole cloth. This is something that you would call a Turing test. You're trying to decide whether the AI is credible as a human. And that started in the 1940s, actually, with an article of Alan Turing's that came out in 1950, where that was the criterion for deciding whether AI was credible. And if you want to, you can look up an entity called Eugene Goostman. Eugene Goostman is not a human. Eugene Goostman is a chatbot. And if you want to have a truly surreal conversation with someone, just look him up and have a chat with him, because he is nuts. And it will be great fun. But the term AI wasn't even created until 1956. And then there were a whole lot of conferences at educational institutions, people from Dartmouth, people from Princeton, people from Columbia, people from MIT. And not until 1968 do we get the concept of HAL, the originally friendly and then very dangerous AI in 2001, A Space Odyssey. So now we have hostile AI as a possibility. You can go to Jabberwacky, not Jabberwocky, and chat with that chatbot, and you will have a surreal experience dating back to 1988. In 1997, IBM's Deep Blue beat Garry Kasparov, the then reigning international grandmaster chess champion, and made history because Kasparov beat them the last time that they went around with it. Now we have, full circle again, another concept of artificial intelligence as very, very simpatico, lovable, cute, adorable, and that's Steven Spielberg's Artificial Intelligence, the movie in 2001. It was in 2009 that Google started working on a driverless car. And so that's been in the works for a long time, and it really hasn't quite come to fruition yet. So not everything that people think is going to happen immediately does. The costs of creating an AI have skyrocketed. The
Tony,
chat, yeah.
just a question. Somebody's asking if the slides are supposed to be going on or if we're in the right slide.
This is just an outline of the history.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go on from there later. I'm just talking about what's in the listing. So the costs of these things have skyrocketed. GPT costs about $78 million, but Google has an AI called Gemini, which is just coming out, which cost $191 million. And that figure is for what they call training the AI, giving the AI information that it then uses to predict new information. And that can be a problem, which I'll explain a little bit later. I don't think most people know that in 2022, China had over 61% of all new patents relating to AI. Wasn't the US, it wasn't anywhere in the West, it was China. So now we're going to go here. Okay, these are the concepts. When we're talking about artificial intelligence, right now we're generally talking about something called a large language model. So what I just said is what it does. It takes a large selection of existing text, goes through it, analyzes it, and uses what it has already learned to predict what logically would come next in what you're saying or what you're looking for. Sometimes this can be very helpful. Sometimes it's very frustrating. And sometimes AI is just plain wrong. Give you an example of what it does. If anybody who has Word, the Word program on their computer, and has a relatively recent version, is actually using prediction software unless you turn it off. And it can cause you problems as a writer because it makes suggestions. And if you don't notice that it has changed the word that you put in the sentence because it thinks a different word is better, you will end up with its word in your sentence, which might not be what you mean. It can be the wrong form of there if you're not using grammar checker, or it can be a totally different word altogether. It can say accept instead of accept. You can do all kinds of funny things to your writing, and I've actually known some writers, and I've been one of them, unfortunately, a couple of times, where I saved my work thinking, well, I know what I wrote, and sending it to somebody to read, and they said, did you really mean that? And I said, no, that's not what I wrote. So not only do you need to check it to see that the spelling is correct, you need to check it to see whether AI allowed you to say what you wanted to say. So that's going to be a whole new level of proofreading and concern. And as it becomes more and more aggressive, which I found that it has, you need to be doubly careful. We have a question of bias. We have a question of who is doing the programming, basically. And the people doing the programming, you will see that they have a point of view, even though they may try not to express it. Somewhere under the surface, very often it exists. There was a famous problem that I do not want to repeat here. I don't want to put the photographs up, but AI was asked to do a discussion of Hitler's army, and it put ethnically diverse people into Hitler's army who were not there. And we know they weren't there because they were people that Hitler was trying to kill. So it is definitely an issue. It can slant your results if you accept what AI is telling you. Now, digital content created by AI is a whole other problem. It may generate content that isn't true, and it does that very often. You may say, do this, and I hate to anthropomorphize this because I know that I have a tendency to do that, but it tends to want to satisfy your desire to have an answer to a question. And in trying to quote unquote please you, it may tell you something because it makes up something to give you an answer. So anything that's generated by AI, I was hearing for the last year or so people suggesting that you just tell AI the subject and ask it to write a 300-word blog post on that subject, and then you post it. And you can post it 50 times on 50 different media, and you will get a lot of following from SEO content because some AIs are very good with search engine optimization. The problem with that is AI might not be telling you the truth. And if you post it, you're posting an untruth on the internet. You're posting bad information. And that goes into the business about faulty and inaccurate results. And sometimes they call that hallucination. And I'll show you how that crops up in the work later, because it's definitely part of the problem that we deal with when we deal with AI. Okay. Right after it was announced that these authors had all filed suit, other people started piling in and filing suit. The reason why the problem existed was that a lot of books are either accessible on the internet or pirated on the internet and can be downloaded and used. And what they were doing was taking these authors' works, feeding them into an AI platform, and then anybody could ask that AI, please write me a query letter and 3 chapters in the style of John Grisham. And the AI could do that. Please write in the style of George R.R. Martin. The AI could do that. That was one of the reasons why I did an article at the beginning of that series of articles that I wrote for The Sage on AI. I did 3 poems by AI posing as Shakespeare. I did 3 sonnets. I didn't want to pose as any of the authors who are alive and take royalties from them. But AI had no compunction about this. And this is my personal opinion. I think that a lot of the people who are at the heads of companies who train AI or create AI, and a lot of the people who are doing the programming came up in one of 2 ways through the science fiction ranks, because so many people are interested in both science fact and science fiction. And there are 2 major trends in science fiction. One is the technology trend, and the other is the social engineering trend. And these trends coalesce with AI. The idea was originally that the internet would be completely open and that everyone would be sharing everything equally, which is part of the social engineering thing. Everyone is a creator, and therefore no one is entitled to special treatment as a creator. So that's part of the mentality that goes into wanting to take these styles or these personas from the individual authors and make them accessible to everybody. On the other hand, we have these copyright laws that say you have a copyright in your work, your style is your own. And so we already have that sort of conflict being played out in our society. This is one example of it. And I have a set of references for all of these slides so that you can go to the original source and check more of it, because a lot of these are longer articles and I can't tell you the whole story of the article in the presentation, but you can get all of them. Just ask the office and they will be happy to send you a copy. I'll send them a copy. There is a site that I've listed in the handout that is aggregating all the information from all the different copyright suits. So if you have an interest in following that, that will be in the handout. So then I started going to individual AIs, and I tend to be kind of human with them. Chatty is ChatGPT 4.0, not 4.0, 4.0. It's not a zero. So I was telling them I'm giving a PowerPoint presentation. Please create 5 slides with bullet points listing the advantage to the writer of using AI to write a book blurb for the back cover. So far, so good. Then I asked, please document this. That's where we start getting into trouble. That was the answer I got back. I looked at the slides and I said, some of this doesn't sound right to me. I'm going to go further. So I can't give you the sources. No, 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 no sources. I don't give you sources. Okay, I asked Claude the same questions. And then he added, I think it's a he. I'm not sure. It's probably an it. I just love that. In a real presentation, you would use actual references from reputable sources to support your statements. But Claude had just made a series of, major claims and would not substantiate any of them. But the thing that got me was that Claude was aware that I had already talked to ChatGPT. And I found that to be very interesting. So Claude was going to give me a different set of answers from what ChatGPT gave me, and Claude did. Then I did the same thing with Yama. I spoke with, he said he knew I'd spoken with Claude, and that I adopted deliberately a totally different point of view and perspective on the questions. So it's not secret. If you speak to one of them, the other one might know about it. So that's a whole other level of things to hear about. And I thought that Yama was a bit more honest, clarifying that the slides are based on his understanding of the topic and may not have any evidence to support them. Well, why on earth would I give a presentation that has no substantiation whatsoever? Why would anybody do that? And I don't understand. Maybe one of you can explain the logic to me. It says, as a conversational AI, I strive to provide helpful and informative responses, but I may not always have the most up-to-date or authoritative information. I was totally mystified by the logic of that. I'll give you an answer. I don't guarantee that it makes sense or is up to date or any of that stuff. No, it's not. It isn't. It isn't. Now, this is a whole other level of creation here. Perplexity. I just loved Perplexity. The list was there, the references were there, and they were checkable. They were the actual quote that the subject was based on, that the statement was based on, in quotation marks as a hyperlink to the actual document in which the statement was made. And you could go directly to the document. You could check everything out instantly. I loved it. They were current. They were accurate, and they were authoritative. But this is not the AI that most people think about. When someone says to you AI, you think ChatGPT. And I actually know people who are using ChatGPT to create investment strategies and whatever, and it's dangerous. It's extremely dangerous, because when they say that, 74% of X is in a category, if you don't check that percentage, you could be wildly off. It's not something that you want to write a sociology textbook and base it on AI. You need to check every blessed reference that thing gives you. But it's easy to check this way. It's not a problem. So perplexity is in a slightly different category. It's something called an aggregator. So it claims it's an aggregator. The other AI producers and content producers are not too thrilled with it, because it does actually call them on everything. It will give you your list of sources. It will give you multiple links, but they don't like it because it's up to date. And one of the problems with ChatGPT, Claude, Yama, uh, when I asked them, how recent is your information? They said 2021. Now that's 3 years ago, almost. It's going to be 4 years ago soon. September 2021 was what they told me their latest data was. So if you're looking for the latest information, you're not asking ChatGPT, even Chat 4.0, because according to Chat GPT 4.0, they are occasionally updated, but it's sporadic. And so unless you ask them, you won't know that. And I just wanted to make sure that you had that information. Perplexity is the only one that says that it pulls its data in response to your request as you make your request, as you ask your question. You're getting the answer, and it's pulling it from current internet sources. But it's the only ChatGPT that does that. Now we're going to identifying AI generated text, and there are many reasons why it's important to try and figure this out. Part of it is that Amazon, if you're putting something up on KDP, will ask you if it's AI generated. Right now, they're not prohibiting you from putting it up, but you may not be able to copyright anything that is AI generated, and they may, at a certain point in the future, decide what percentage of your text can be AI generated in order for you to still retain the ability to copyright it, because you didn't write it if you used AI. I have a couple of books where I have a couple of illustrations that are AI generated, and I always identify them, but I don't use any AI text. And AI might conceivably be identified by plagiarism checkers as being plagiarism. They're not telling you where it comes from. They're not telling you, they won't really tell you where it comes from, even if you ask them. So you will need to put all of that text into a plagiarism checker before you put it into anything you publish, and just make sure that you're not unintentionally plagiarizing something because AI told you to do it. One of the ways you can find out is repetitive phrases. It may keep saying, and then he said, or then he did, and it just goes on the same way. Something weird about the emotional context of things that are written by AI. Once you have read a few of them, you will probably pick up on the idea that something's not quite right, and the use of jargon is very, very frequent. Whatever the buzzword on the internet is, or has been in the past couple of years, you will see the buzzwords and they will keep recurring. But there's a list of AI checkers, and handy dandy, I've put a list of them in the handout. So you can go check them, and they're generally free. So you shouldn't have a problem doing that. It's one more level of work for you, actually, if you use AI. It's supposed to be saving you time and effort, but you have to check all of these things and you have to be aware of all of these things. And I'm not sure that like the AI assistant that is going to do programming for you, it might not put more bugs in your work than you need to have. And here are some of the downsides. As I just told you, outdated data, unintended plagiarism, the big publishers, the big AI people, and the large publishers, which we all know exist and are very powerful, tend to want to control the market. And we have things that very much approximate shadow banning. I mentioned before the potential of writing a blog and then posting it in many different places, or writing a piece of content and posting it in half a dozen different outlets. They don't outright shadow ban that, but what they have done recently is only give you credit for writing it once. So it will come up in the search engine as this item, and then at the bottom of the search screen, it'll say, we have deliberately not included other similar examples of this material. And it's as if you didn't write them. So unless you actually change some of the text, and I don't know exactly what their algorithm says this week, but it's a certain percentage of the text that you need to change from one posting to another posting in order for the algorithm of the week to consider it a new piece of text. Otherwise, it doesn't register with the search engines as being unique or special in any way. So they just ignore you. One of the biggest problems that I've seen with particularly marketers, when I speak to marketers, they're just going to the internet and, asking AI to write marketing copy for them, is it's all going to sound the same. It's going to kind of become homogenized. What is the best way to do this? It has not an unreal feel to it. One of the things I find myself doing is that when I get multiple emails from the same marketer, rather than opening them because I'm curious about what that person's going to say, I've stopped opening them. And so you may run the same risk if you are doing this. If you're using AI, there's something that doesn't come across as human communication to the people that you're trying to communicate with. You may use the right words, the right marketing words, but the emotional context is lost, and if you don't fix it before you send it out, you're going to have a problem. Another problem is if you do not exercise your creativity, it's like any other muscle, it's going to atrophy. The AI will tell you what to say and you'll say it, but it won't be you. It'll be the AI speaking. I want to go back now to the idea that one AI knew that I had spoken to another AI. Part of that was that I used a convenience platform, which aggregates dozens of AIs together, both the textual AIs and the visual AIs. There's a way to do visual materials using AI as well. And it's a platform called, well, the person who introduced me to it called it Magi, but it's spelled Magai. and it aggregates all of these AIs together, and you can use them. You can switch from one to another. You can get different answers, as I did. And the only way to try to wall them off from each other is to ask each AI the same question, but in a different chat. If you put it in the same chat, they will talk to each other. They will tell each other, yeah, she asked that question already. Let's give her a different answer. So that's where it is. And your dialogue is public. So if you're going to AI and you're asking it to write an article for you or a chapter for you, that is going into public knowledge, and anybody who wants to see what you said can do that. The only platform you can't do that on is Magi right now, until somebody hacks Magi, because somebody probably will at some point in the future. So here's what I suggest as a practical thing to do. Research and drafting. A lot of people use AI to do outlines for them. And it can be very good at outlines if you know the subject. You need to have a knowledge of your subject. You can't just ask AI to tell you what to say, because it will, and it may be totally fanciful, or at least partially fanciful. Good for language correction, like Grammarly or analysis. Yeah, okay. But you need to know your subject. You can't just rely on AI. It's not going to do the whole job for you. It can't do the whole job. It's not supposed to do the whole job. And if you ask it to do the whole job, you will be stepping in a big heap of trouble at some point. So, any questions, any thoughts, anything I can do to help? And if you want to email me, that's my email there.
That's a long email, Leonie.
Well, it's dayspringresources.com.